really got to try on that left-hand side. What happened?
Oh, but I'm going up and over and bloody head over biscuit. It wasn't enough stability there for myself, but no, I was busting for a bit of meat this game. It didn't seem to work out.
Hello, cheers, and welcome once again to the Scrum of the Earth podcast, the weekly show for news, reviews, great interviews, and so much more all about the world of rugby. As always, my name is David Lawrence. I'm an American rugby fan who follows the game wherever I can find it, all over the globe. If you'd like to get in touch, I'm easy to find on all your socials, and you can always just drop an email to thescrumoftheearth@gmail.com. Well, as you have no doubt deduced, this is not your regular weekly episode, but is yet another hybrid weekly / bonus episode this time. I am thrilled to announce a brand new guest. You probably know him from multiple media sources. Caolan Scully, he's a freelance journalist, and for me, an expert I listen to wherever I can find him. Caolan, thank you so much for joining us here. Welcome to the show. How the heck are you?
I'm good, David. Thank you very much for having me on. It's always... I'm not going to say nerve-wracking, but it always gets me going when I'm on a new podcast like this. So really excited to talk about a very busy weekend, as we discussed.
Indeed.
And we'll stick to the rugby, but a busy weekend in Ireland, not just for rugby reasons.
Well, as I was writing my little intro, I started trying to list all the podcasts and all the media where people might find you, and then I realized maybe I'll save that 10 minutes, and I'll just let you pick maybe the top 3 places where people can find you.
Yeah, so I do have my own page at Caolan Rugby Podcast. The handle is there for anyone on YouTube. We do have the United Rugby Rewind podcast with fellow friend of the pod, Hugh Griffin, as the excellent anchor and host, and the Red Arrow podcast for all things Munster Rugby as well, because Munster are one of the biggest brands in the game, so I'd be doing them a disservice if I didn't get that one in there early and often.
I listened to all 3 of those things. It's all great. I really appreciate you taking even more time to chat about rugby. It's just a thrill for me. Of course, naturally, the real reason I've asked you here is for one purpose, and that, of course, is to discuss the All-Ireland hurling final played just 4 months ago between Clare and Cork. Clare winning the game 329 to 134 to claim their 5th title. I have no idea what those numbers mean.
Well, if you're going to ask me to explain hurling to a non-Irish audience, I'll just say it's the greatest game in the world. It's unbelievably quick. It's unbelievably agile. It's raw athleticism, power, everything you want. I have family ties to Clare, so I was happy to see them win. But as a Munster fan, I should remain somewhat partial and say that Cork are also a very good team who could well have got over the line. As they're 2 Munster counties. But if anyone has not seen hurling, and especially if you have any listeners in the UK, because I know the BBC to show the occasional game, it's certainly worth looking into. And yes, the scoreboard is confusing, but then we're rugby fans, and rugby is probably the most complex game in the world. So I don't think it's anything our great listeners couldn't keep up with.
The numbers, I thought, are these blood pressures they're giving us? I can't. I do know the only legitimately Irish bar in my area, everything's hurling. There's one tiny little corner of a wall that has rugby stuff, and everything else is hurling everywhere. It must be. Is it really a big deal there?
It is. It is by population, I suppose Gaelic football is probably bigger. Like everything with a round ball, some people just prefer a round ball. But hurling is probably the national game, really. And funnily enough, I'm actually doing a project on kind of hurling's cultural influence at the moment for college for the Christmas assignment. So I might just draw on, maybe send them in this direction and be like, look, I talked about it here. I'm spreading the game better than anyone else. It's not true, but I could, might get extra credit.
I've been advertising in the United States, technically. By the way, just to start us off, if you would, tell us a little bit about your own rugby journey. Like, how did you discover the sport, and how did you sort of progress from that moment to realizing that you wanted to be a rugby journalist?
It's another long one, and I know Irish people like to talk, and I'm no exception to that rule. But I think the best way to do it is just when I was growing up, Munster Rugby was starting to become the cultural icon that it would become. You look at the great team of the 2000s. My own family would have supported it. I just was was hooked. Looking back now, those games weren't as entertaining as we thought compared to the standard on field at the moment. But I just loved it. I can't play due to medical reasons, but always had an interest. Tried out coaching, tried a bit of analysis, tried a bit of everything, and just decided I'd give the writing a go and then the podcast a go. I actually didn't want to do podcasts, ironically now, because I'm about 200 episodes in 2 years and I'm absolutely swamped at this stage. But at the initiation stage, I didn't want to do podcasts, but I said I'd give it a go. Got the hook, the thrill of it around the time of the World Cup. Continued with that. Obviously, it didn't go great for Ireland, and now I'm actually doing a journalism degree for my master's in college, and I'm loving it. You know, the opportunity to cover Irish rugby is quite special because all 4 provinces and the 2 national teams are doing really well, and the game is growing here. You look at the viewership figures. I know it came out the other day that the most watched Six Nations game in the UK had 4 million viewers. The same game in Ireland had almost 1 million, which when you think of it in comparative sense is unbelievable. So it's a great time to be involved. Yes, there's financial challenges and there's all that has to be discussed, and form and tactics. But if you don't want to talk about that, you're probably in the wrong gig, because sport is about analysis, and it is about all that as well. And I absolutely love it. And you know, just to get the chance to speak to you like yourself, and I've spoken to people in New Zealand and Australia for my own podcast for the Ireland games this past month, and I love that. I love the opportunity, because sport is a wonderful community event, really, at its core, bringing people together, and that's why I really enjoy it. And you know, to be spreading the Irish game over to the States is it's a new one for me, but I am going to enjoy it. I'm going to embrace the next hour and whatever amount of minutes.
Love it. Oh, well, you already mentioned mutual friend Hugh. He and I always are talking about stats, diving into the stats, parsing through, you know, does this actually mean anything? Can we derive any actual understanding from this other number? It's always that's part of my favorite thing about stats is kind of combing through them and seeing what's valuable. But I do want to say, you know, you have been spending a lot of time with Hugh recently. I started to get concerned he might have actually kidnapped you. I know you can't talk about it for the audio version, but you know, just between us, if you're in danger, blink twice.
I'm not going to blink twice. I don't need to. But Hugh is always on my case about different stats and different things. But he's a hive mind in and of himself. But the URC podcast has been brilliant for that. Not just for Hugh, but for Ben and Alan as well. The lads are brilliant, and I know we'll touch a bit about the URC today. It is a league that is also absolutely thriving. And it was a mistake of mine not to mention it there a few minutes ago, because it has just gone up leaps and bounds in recent years. And I missed a lot of it this weekend, don't get me wrong, because I was covering Munster and I was covering Ireland. But it's in a great place as we head into, what are we, about halfway through season 3 now? I think
just over half.
Season 4?
Right about there. This is season 4, right? Yeah.
This is season 4. Yeah, we're just under halfway through season 4, and it's in an unbelievable position.
Well, I'm keen to talk Munster and all things Irish rugby. I was hoping you could touch on the Ireland match first, and then quickly just run through the URC weekend. They did us a favor of wrapping up yesterday, so it's all actually in the rearview mirror. Of course, switching my little bit here, the semi-inexplicable end of the Autumn Nations brought us Ireland versus Australia. I had a feeling Ireland were just going to spank them, but it ended up being a pretty close one. It was 5-13 at halftime. Were you kind of throwing up in your mouth a little bit at that stage?
No, I do not throw up in my mouth during games anymore. Maybe for the big ones, but not for the games like these. But in some ways, I was not very surprised. I don't think Ireland's form has been brilliant, unfortunately. So I wasn't too surprised in that regard. But saying that, I think the Ireland response that we saw in that second half was very impressive. Australia deserved their credit. They were really, really good, really impressive, really, really, really accurate in what they did defensively and offensively as well. So I was very impressed with them. But for Ireland they did make a slow start, and that was a worry, because it has not been a great autumn by their standards. And I mentioned this before with others, like, you have to hold a team to the standards they set, you know, and players to the standards they set. You can't judge, you know, a guy playing for his school as if he's I don't know, Man Anu or Dan Carter. You have to, do everything relatively. And I think Ireland probably haven't been great. I think they'll admit that themselves. But just to get a win is massive. I feel like if they had lost yesterday, the Six Nations takes on a very different complexion, especially going in as defending champions.
Yeah. One thing worthy of note in this match, of course, 134 caps for Cian Healy. Can you talk about how good he's been for the program over these years? What a player.
Yeah, look, I've tried to put it into words about Cian Healy before, and to be honest, I think the reason it's so difficult for me is because I've done it before last year, before he missed the World Cup, and felt like that was it, and he was done, and it was just so difficult to come to terms with that. But the best way I can describe Cian Healy, and I've heard this said in NFL parlance quite a lot about, like, if you can divide their career in two, and they've got two great halves of a career, like you're talking about an all-time great. It's said about like Tom Brady. But Cian Healy is that, because around 2016, 2017, Cian Healy had serious injury issues. It looked like he was arguably never going to play again. He was on the brink of retirement, got back, as always, with those long-term injuries. You never know how it's going to go. But the first half of his career, he's an Ireland great. The second half of his career, he's an Ireland great. He breaks the caps record. And I have to say it, for a prop to break the caps record is always very, very cool. Justice for props, not just here, but everywhere. Like, this is the Scrum of the Pod. We're not going to talk just about mauls either. But I'm absolutely chuffed for him, because to think about what he went through a couple of years ago, and to think his career was almost cut short just like that, and then to be in this position, I think is just phenomenal. And I'm really happy for him. On a personal note, I'm really, really happy for him, I must say. And people may not appreciate it, but I think in Ireland he will go down as one of the all-time greats. I think he goes down as Ireland's greatest ever loosehead. The only thing is, there's a man currently in that jersey right now who is playing world-class rugby and has done for about 3 years. So there will be a debate when Andrew Porter retires as to who the better player was. But you'll never dispute that Cian Healy wasn't a legend of the Irish game.
The fans knew it. The response in the stadium when he came on, it was stirring. It really was worth taking a few moments there. And of course, he was like, yeah, I'm just getting back to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's actually funny too, because as a lot of people would know, Ireland have two anthems, and you did notice Cian Healy getting quite emotional during both of them, which is completely understandable. But I remember hearing an ex-player say it before, that they found Ireland's calls harder because you get through one and then you have to go again and you have to sing again and you have to go through the emotion. But it was obviously very difficult for him. But like, just to put in a very good shift for those 13, 14 minutes as well, it should be said.
Definitely.
But just a great honor for him and for everyone around him, really. Like, it's so cliche to say, but like, there was medical staff who would have helped him through. There was S&Cs, there was physios, there was even his coaches at, say, Leinster, who would have helped him back up to speed, and at Ireland. And I think even the fact that Andrew Porter is, again, to use Andrew Porter, and I apologise in some ways for pigeonholing him into this Cian Healy conversation, the fact that he can go 70 minutes has also extended Cian Healy's career, because it has helped massively. The fact that Cian Healy, like, he's only averaging, I think, 15 minutes a game for Ireland this year in the last 9 games, which kind of just speaks to Porter's, freak of nature. He's like Wolverine, I think, he's the only way I can put it. He's like Wolverine.
That's a great comparison.
He just doesn't go down, which is, but again, this is the Cian Healy moment, and credit to Cian Healy, an Irish legend for sure.
The way you talk about him, it makes me think too, and so I enjoy rooting against teams and against players sometimes, and Peter O'Mahony's always been one of those guys I love rooting against. He's a perfect bad guy if you're not rooting for his team, but you'd have to be an idiot to think he's not incredible. He's just such an incredible player. But they were kind of talking about him being put out to pasture before the 2019 World Cup, and they're like, okay, I guess he's going to try. And in some ways, he got better over the next few years. Maybe we're seeing some rust now, but he also sort of found a whole second gear and reinvented himself.
Yeah, and I think that's the fun thing about rugby and rugby analysis, is how players can adapt and change over time. I think Conor Murray's another good example of the elder statesman in that current Ireland squad, where how do I use my experience to improve. And I'll give a shout out to Three Red Kings, who some people may know from online. He does a offensive ruckwork stat for Munster on every single game they play in Ireland, every single game. And the one thing, whenever I read it, it's Peter O'Mahony, it's just constant positive involvements. And I think that is testament not just to his experience, but how he's learned from his experience. He's not going in making hits for the sake of it, diving at lads for the sake of it. If he hits a ruck, it stays hit. If he, it's constant positives, even if he's not as impactful as he used to be. And I think that's something that, as much as that is on the players, and I do want to give credit to the Healy's, the O'Mahonys, the Murrays, that it's also helped by Ireland's player welfare system and the fact that players get managed and minute managed, sometimes a bit too much, I will add, but they get minute managed so much that I think it does help these lads have slightly longer careers than other countries, compared to, say, France, where you're talking, you're playing 25 club games a year. Yeah. If you're a 100 cap veteran, like that is a lot of rugby over the course of your career.
Yeah, my joke is always with the top 14 that they play more rounds than exist in a year, so they're always like half a year behind.
You're not far off. It does give off that vibe sometimes, especially when you're mid Six Nations or mid autumn internationals, and you're just sitting there and you're wondering, like, why is the top 14 still on? Like, I thought I could take a break from this, but no. And then you get like yesterday,
are still packed for those games too.
Yeah, and like yesterday, you get like Van beating La Rochelle just as you take your eye off the ball, and it just shows you cannot take your eye off the ball.
Yeah.
with these guys.
So in the Australia match, though, defense did win out in the end. It was 22-19. Do you feel good about that margin? Maybe it was too close for comfort, considering where these teams came in ranked.
Yeah, potentially. I would have grown up with the Joe Schmidt era of Ireland, so I was always very fearful of what Joe Schmidt and Australia could do to this Irish team. I have great respect for him, not just as a coach, but as a person. But it's not brilliant from Ireland. 3 tries is good, and I will give them that because of the fact that Ireland are, I think, of the top 10 nations in the world, they're like 7th in tries scored this year. They haven't scored a huge amount. So that's probably, score 3 against Australia, against a pretty resolute Australian defence is pretty decent. But attack has seemed to have gotten a bit stale. Now, if you have Leinster fans listening to this, they'll say I'm just a Munster fan, and it's literally written on screen. I put Munster fan before I put in Ireland fan, so take that as you will. But I mean,
you kind of blew my opportunity to pretend that you were a Glasgow fan, which is always a great way to rile up Munster fans.
You know what? I'm not going to say I respect you more, David, because you do great work here, but I do respect you more for being prepared for the bit. But just to get back to it, I think. Like the fact that Ireland scored 3 tries against a resolute defence is pretty decent, but Ireland's attack has looked stale for large parts of the year. Personally, and this is where the Munster-Leinster thing was going to come in, I do think Jack Crowley is someone you can build an attack around. I think with Sam Prendergast, and this is not basing Sam Prendergast on the kind of perception of him, but more what he is. He's a 21-year-old, very similar to a lot of 10s that come out of Leinster, who all play a very similar style of rugby. That style of a 10 who just stands and passes and stands and kicks is kind of fading out of the game. You look at how South Africa are gone from Pollard to Libbok or Sasha, Feinberg and Gambazulu. You look at how Marcus Smith is now there at England. Finn is Finn. There's no other way to put that.
He's always the exception to the rule, though.
He really is, but it's kind of the way the game is going now. And I do think with Crowley, and we've seen him when he came off the bench, his ability to attack soft shoulders, he's led Irish 10s in dominant carries this year. That is very niche. And maybe Hugh will appreciate that one, as we mentioned. But that's what he can bring, where Sam Prendergast is unlocking defences through passes. I just feel like with Ireland playing so much off 9 across 2024, when Gibson Park was there, and having a 10, or wanting to have a 10 who was very much a facilitator, I'm just not sure how sustainable that is as rugby evolves, because we've seen even just this past month how law changes can change everything, and that can sound so dramatic to someone who doesn't follow the game week on week, but the contestable kicking law has been a massive change. It has suited shallow kicks, or what I call shallow kicks, the ones that are only on maybe 15-20 meters, so much more. It has suited your dominant physical guys in the air. But attack will have law variations that will change things and will move things around. It's already a very attack-focused sport at the moment compared to 6-7 years ago. And I do think someone like Crowley is someone you can build around, whereas I think Ireland are still stuck in that Sexton mould. This is what Sexton did. This is what the Leinster 10s can do. This is what Gibson Park is used to. And that's fine. Don't get me wrong. That is absolutely fine. And I think the Leinster game plan has a very high floor. I think that's one thing about it, because they're so well drilled and they're playing the same system from schools. I know Squidge talked about this before, but I think when you get to test level, it is about you're getting the most out of every single player on the field, because you cannot afford to carry players at test level. Jack Crowley was being carried by Ireland at times this year because the system is not suited to him. It's the same as what we've seen with Marcus Smith before, but look at Marcus Smith now that he kind of has a little bit more free reign, chance to, he's got centres he can play off of. He's got a fullback there who suits him perfectly in George Furbank. That's what I would like to see Ireland go down with Crowley. I'm not saying, we send Sam Prendergast to, go play with some other country. But I would like to see them.
I do
move
like
that
the
way.
difference in their game too. I like when you have both available for a game and you can switch it up, because it completely changes the way the attack looks, and I feel like that's hard for a defense to adjust to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think variety is wonderful in rugby because of that. You have different styles in 9s, 10s, 8s, different types of scrummagers, and even different types of second rows and centres. And that is something that Ireland could benefit from, is having different types of players, say at the 10 position, at centre, at fullback, wherever it might be, because I firmly believe that the depth is there. I think there's an unbelievable depth of talent in Irish rugby at the moment, better than it ever has been. But at the same time, I don't think this is an Irish system that has evolved, so I'm not sure. Like, I look at Cormac Izuchukwu of Ulster, who played against Fiji. I'm not sure if that system is suited to him. Not saying we rip up the whole thing to suit him, but I would like to see tweaks and like to see him given a bit more free reign, because as much as Cormac Izuchukwu is a fabulous talent, he is the kind of new mode of player that's coming out of Ireland with Tom Ahern, Ryan Baird, Harry Sheridan, all very, very similar players. So I would like to see us move towards having more edge forwards, just for that example. But even at 10, having the different styles is a very good thing. Being able to rotate is a very good thing. Now, I would prefer if Ireland rotated more this November, just to get minutes into a few different guys, because I do think, I've done a deep dive on this. I haven't fully finished the numbers, but it's a very top-heavy squad minutes-wise. Your Porters, Doris, Lowe, Byrne, the guys who you can name off the top of your head without thinking, are dominating the most amount of minutes for Ireland. And then it just falls off after about 20 guys, which is a sign it has been just the old reliables, which is fair enough. But if you start playing the 8 ball, you'll never get in front. And that's the way it is with blooding and with evolving and trying to regenerate what is a very, very good team.
Well, a lot of people have been Andy Farrell's been getting some criticism recently for that very thing. I was going to ask about that when we get later on. I did want to get to the URC. This is where I was going to insert my little, as a Glasgow fan, you must be happy with, but we can just go past it. But so Glasgow were taking on Scarlets this weekend. The comms right at the top, they said Glasgow is, quote, an extremely difficult venue, unquote. And I know the stats, but are we all collectively overhyping this team a little bit? Like, is the press kind of killing them with kindness?
Killing with kindness, I would refer to other teams for that, but I don't want to get sued, so I won't get into which ones. Glasgow, I'm not sure if they're one of them. I think it's just a case of they are so far ahead of Edinburgh at the moment that they are the media darling in Scotland, and that's absolutely fair. I think they're a very good team. Taking off my Munster hat and putting on the URC one, which I need to put on because it's recording night for the URC podcast. I would like to see Glasgow going on a run in Europe this year and showing teams, because what we seen from them last year, like they went to South Africa, they won in Pretoria, they beat Munster in Thomond Park. Like, they don't fear anyone. But I would like to see them prove it to a few more teams, and that can sound like a backhanded compliment sometimes, and I respect that. But I would like to see it. I would like to see it for them going forward. But they're still, I I look at that league table, like you got Leinster there on 34 points, Glasgow second on 27, the Bulls on 24. Yes, the Bulls have a game in hand, but I'm still, if I'm Glasgow, I'm really happy with where they're at the moment. I really am.
I feel like they've gotten more than they expected out of Franco. I feel like their team has been elevated by picking a coach nobody knew how good he was.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that as well. Like when he was at Italy, it looked like, oh, maybe this is the guy, but it just didn't work out for him. But he has been an unbelievable addition to Glasgow and to the league. He didn't win Coach of the Year last year, which caused a bit of consternation, but he's been absolutely brilliant with them. But I think that's the big thing as well, is that Glasgow went from being a good team with good talent to looking like a very well-coached team, regardless of who's on the field. And I think that is testament to Franco Smith. It's testament to any coach when you're able to say that, but he has to get the credit there. Like, yes, they got the two Pilatos and Jones and Jack Dempsey and guys like that and Rory Darge, who I love Rory Darge as a player, and I should say that, but when they still look as formidable when they've rotated, it is testament to Franco Smith.
Naturally, in this one, Scarlets, they actually went up. They got up 8-0, and they were like, hey, we're up 8-0. Let's get a yellow card. And and then, of course, womp, womp. 17-15 was the pretty close score. The Scarlets even had a shot there at the end, but kind of bungled it. If we were to start the conversation about the dire straits of the Welsh regions, we'd be here for way too long. But if you could pick one Welsh region to try to fix, if you had the power to add one element, maybe it's money, maybe it's a star coach, maybe it's a star player, what region could most quickly go from the basement where they are to a real contender?
That is tough. I think history says the Ospreys, because they were 8th last year. I still think they've got a great coach. They just have not got going this year at all. I was going to say maybe the coaching announcement has set them back, but I don't want to say that because I actually don't believe that when people say that about coaches leaving. I think it's more just a case of, it's Welsh rugby. There's obstacles put in front of all these teams. I think Cardiff are probably the easiest to sell if you said, you want to sign players, like they are the capital. You've got the Millennium Stadium, you've got the Cardiff City Stadium, are all there, even if they don't play in them that often. But I'd probably lean towards Cardiff. Ospreys for a certain type of player. If I was to build a forwards-built, on-ball team who is just going to annoy you and get in your face and just be like proper, like the Welsh rugby that I grew up with, I'd go with Ospreys. But aside from that, I think I go with Cardiff at the moment. They haven't had the best starts of the season, don't get me wrong. They've been good. I think Matt Sherrod is a good coach. But
there have been bright spots.
There's been bright spots. And we've seen it last year as well. They were on the wrong side of a lot of one-score games last year, including in Thomond Park against Munster and against Connacht, I think it was. And they ran Leinster close as well for the guts of 60 minutes. But this year they've beaten Ulster and they're starting to get a few more results in there. Well, I think they've got 3 wins now or 4 wins now. 4 actually. They're up to 4. Sorry, apologies. Right. So it's a really good start to the season for them. Can they keep it going? I'm not too sure, but I'd probably go with Cardiff, and that's not even based off the table because I had the Shields open first to just have a run through that. But no, I'd probably go with Cardiff. I think you've got a few good young players there as well, with the likes of like Winnett and with Mackenzie Martin and guys like that are of the younger bracket. And the winger Teo Cabango, who I'm a big fan of. I love a winger who can just run at you and set you backwards, even if they're not that big. Shane McCarthy at Munster has it. Shane Bolton a small bit at Connacht, although he's a big man. Like, I love wingers who can do that. Teo Cabango has that. Emmanuel Faye also is the prime example of what I'm trying to describe here.
A classic English player.
A very like, if anyone ever goes on, and maybe you've had guests on who've said like England needs to go back to their roots of being expansive. No. England's roots, as far as I'm concerned, is the toughest 15 men you can put together, and they just beat the living bleep out of you. And I don't want to give England too much respect, but
so if we bring back hacking, will they be number 1 in the world in no time?
Potentially. I think they've got to get their house in order first with the coaching changes and retirements and tactics and so on and so forth, and the RFU just spending money on frivolous things like CEO wages. But no, I think
bonuses for everybody. Here you go.
Bonuses for everyone, and millions for some, pounds for others, I think is one way of putting it. But no, we won't fix English rugby in one night. We might fix Cardiff. I think we're halfway there to fixing Cardiff, though.
Well, Cardiff was up next playing the Dragons. It's funny, too, because we already touched on how fascinated we are with stats and like that one about how Cardiff were losing last year, but all these really close games. I even love the argument about like, does that show you that they're right there, that all these games were winnable, or does that show you a team that has this endemic issue where they can't close it out, where they can't finish the close ones? So, yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but like we said, there's been bright sparks this year. Not gonna lie, I totally missed this game. I looked it up and saw it was 17-9 at the break and 31-23 by the end. And by the way, Ben Whitehouse, he was the on-field official. Whenever he's the lead official on the field and they call up to the TMO, do you picture like a table and Ben Whitehouse's cell phone sitting there just ringing and nobody's answering it?
I haven't before. I can't say it's not going to happen after this. My big thing with Ben Whitehouse is that he's a very good TMO. You will hear him use medium force a lot for like yellow and red cards, to the point that I'm like, I actually don't want to know what high force of danger is. I think Ben is picturing someone coming out with a machete and just, no, bye-bye. But no, like he's a very good. I actually missed this one as well because I was, as I said, I was in Thomond Park yesterday. But this is a good win for Cardiff again, because as much as it's a good win in terms of moving them up the table, they're inside the top four, and that is going to be such an entanglement in the middle of the table come season's end. But it moves them slightly further clear in the Welsh Shield as well. And, I know it's not the most meaningful piece of silverware that you'll ever get, but it is silverware. And I don't think we can dispute that, especially, like Leinster have won the last 3 Irish Shields. Like, it would be silly of me as a Munster fan to make fun of it too much, because obviously it's been so one-sided. But
everybody needs hubcaps.
Everyone needs hubcaps. And as we said about Leinster, it's actually the dub cap, signifying Dublin. But no,
I have not heard that one.
It's look, if Cardiff can push on and get a shield, like get into the top, it would be absolutely brilliant for them. But just as you stare at that league table and you look at the results after 7 rounds, you're like, I can't predict this. Like, I could see Cardiff going on a run. Yeah. I can also see Munster, who are down 11th, the Stormers, Benetton all going on runs. Like, it's too close to call, as they say.
Well, Edinburgh, they were up next facing Benetton. At the beginning, they said, "Oh, these are 2 very evenly matched teams," and I was thinking, should that be? Is that right? But sure enough, Edinburgh went nuts. They scored a point a minute for the first 28 minutes, and it was 35-0 at the break. But then Benetton outscored them 26-5 over the next half hour. It feels like a big coaching issue for me at Edinburgh. Like, you look at that roster, there's no way they should be this inconsistent, right?
Yeah, I think Edinburgh and Benetton, and I hope this isn't too disparaging, are like the 2 kids at school who are way richer than anyone realizes that they are. Both of these teams have a lot of money. They just don't know how to use it. I'm not saying they're signed badly, but like Edinburgh do look poorly coached at times. And there's times where you're watching like Doohan, or you're watching, Jamie Ritchie or someone doing the most brain dead things. It's like, you never do that for Scotland. Why are you doing this for Edinburgh?
Right.
And I'm saying this, because I've seen it in games against Irish teams where you're like, what are you doing? Even the start of the season for Edinburgh, Doohan van der Merwe scores in the corner. He goes for the big dive. If he runs in under the post, then he lost that game by 2 points. It's a very different game, if you remember. So, because Ben Healy missed that conversion. And then Benetton, the team that everyone was expecting to kick on, they're now 2 from 7. Like, yes, there's a draw in there against the Scarlets, but that, I said at the time, I was like, maybe that's the writing on the wall, but maybe that's too strong, because we've seen this film before from the likes of Benetton and teams like that who struggle for consistency. And it feels like it is. I hope they use the European bloc to just focus on improving as a team. Like, it's not about results, just improve, because they'll have Zebra over the Christmas period. So maybe if they can just get into a bit of a flow over the next 6 weeks, they could be a different team. But then the flip side is they'll be going into Six Nations period then, and that's usually when Benetton start to hit the bumps in the road because they lose so many players. So
Right.
very hard to call. But this was, to Edinburgh's credit, this was a must-win game for Edinburgh, and they got it, and they got it in a big way. So I think you have to give them their dues. But the flip side, it was also set for Benetton, and they just didn't come close enough, unfortunately.
Well, Edinburgh might want to use the Christmas period to hire a priest to come and try to resurrect the career of Ben Healy, because I mean that would be a whole separate pod. I love that guy, and I just don't love what's been happening.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I think, funnily enough, I think there's actually a lot of comparisons to be made of Ben Healy and Sam Prendergast in terms of play styles. Tall guys, great
I really
passes.
thought of that when you described it. Yeah.
Massive boot, yeah. Both
kick.
very Irish looking.
You mentioned the NFL. He's very a pocket quarterback. He's the guy who's not going to run away from pressure, but he will deliver it when he's got the room and the time.
Yeah, and it's about putting the different pieces around him. Like that's, I do find, as much as what I said about Tens, about to move on to the next level, I feel like you need a Smith, a Crowley, an Entomac. But I do think in every test level squad, you need a Ben Healy, a Prendergast, a Ross Byrne. Just to use an Irish example, it's guys who are super, super steady, and their floor is like a 6 out of 10 on a bad day. And look, these guys have all had bad games. Like every test player, every rugby player has had bad games. But at 10, having someone who's super steady is good. It's a pity for Ben. I believe he will be leaving at the end of the season, and hopefully that can give him that little bit of a kick. Because he's more than good enough to be on that Scotland team. But maybe this is a word of warning to anyone who's thinking about switching allegiances to Scotland, that it doesn't always work out, because they get about 7 players to do that every year.
I still theorize the issue could be as simple as him cutting his hair. Those beautiful tresses. You're obligated to keep your hair when you've got hair like that.
Yeah, and even you look at like Craig Casey at the weekend, he went back to the mullet. He has not been playing better in his career than he has the last couple of weeks. So is it the power of the mullet? I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. Like, very clearly not a mullet here on top of my head. But
I think it qualifies him for Australia automatically, though.
It would, yeah. That's the only fear factor, is that these players will be lost to other countries, but especially down there. But look, the mullet works, people. The mullet works.
Well, the insane final score in this one was 50-33. It's just a bizarre ending. But I got to ask, how good is Darcy Graham when he's healthy?
Look, Darcy Graham is absolutely electric. The only thing is, will he make the Lions tour? Because number one, he doesn't seem to stay healthy long enough, which is not his fault at all. That's right. Just some people are just cursed with luck. But then at the same time, you've got Matt Hansen, James Lowe, you got Emmanuel Feiboso, and even someone like Tommy Freeman is that kind of, someone who can play around the positions, which is very important. You got the likes of Rio Dyer in there. Doohan, of course. I have to mention Doohan. I'm like, I'm not sure if Darcy Graham makes it on the tour. But then at the same time, if he does, I can see him being a starter. Like, it's just that sort of position. The fact that he doesn't have a massive kicking game might let him down, especially in an Andy Farrell team. But he's just
I feel like he starts
so
the
much
first test and then picks up a knock and is on the plane home. Not that I don't want that, but I just feel like that's the way the Darcy script goes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still betting on the fact that there'll be like a record-breaking amount of Irish players in the test team for test 1, all going to plan, because Andy Farrell is cohesion, and there's no better way to have cohesion than just doubling down on the guys you know. So I'll stick with that for now, but when it comes around and when there is always injuries, unfortunately, I'll get back on that one.
So Zebre versus Ospreys was next. Not a match that held a ton of appeal for me ahead of time, but when I tuned in, the condition, it looked like they might be searching for the Hound of the Baskervilles out there. It was 12-10 at halftime and then 22-17 at full time. I had in my little script, you kind of already addressed this. I was going to say, is this all the Toby Booth factor? You've already said you don't buy that.
No, I don't really, to be honest. That's historically, I don't buy it. So it's not just me defending Toby Booth, who is just an absolute gentleman. I absolutely love him as a coach. I think it's just sometimes what happens with teams. They can just go one season too many as well. I think there's, you look at this Ospreys team, they did roll the dice here. They did, leave out some of their high profile Welsh players. I almost forgot where they were from for a second. They did leave out some of their high profile Welsh players, and I think that might have cost them. Like, I don't want to say that someone like Jack Morgan or Dewey Lake is worth like a certain amount of points. They're probably worth 5 points though. That's the thing. And yeah, it's disappointing for the Ospreys. I feel like this season is starting to just slip away now. Unfortunately, they've lost to Munster as well. Back in another like abysmal night where you would just get wet looking out the window at it. So maybe it's an Osprey. Maybe they bring the bad weather with them. I don't know.
Well, now that the word has come through that Zebre are being sold, what does that do to their season? Like, I feel like it could go either way. They could either just completely give up and say screw it, or it might be the last hurrah. Like, let's leave it all out on the pitch. Let's leave no stone unturned. That's kind of what it looked like yesterday. Of course, they love it when people don't take them seriously. That's always their sort of, the blood in the water.
Yeah, that's their MO, isn't it? Like you go watch that Munster game and no one gave them a chance there. No one gave them a chance this weekend. But credit to them. Like Zebra are putting together a really tidy season. And even if you go back to last year, it looks like they really do start season strong. The only thing is maybe teams start to get to know them and then they get injuries because they've got a smaller squad and it just derails. But like Zebra are 15th after 7 games. That does not sound good. It's worse than where they were last year. But those 2 wins that they got on home soil, I'd be really happy with. They might. They looks like they will move. They'll move to possibly Verona. I think someone said is the favorite candidate. I would love to see them in Rome, just selfishly, because I would go every 2 years if that was the case. But you can never predict how these things go. That's the only thing I will say. You can never predict how stuff like a sale of a team or a move or a team will go, because famously they used to be Ironi as well. But I think they can be happy with their season so far, because as well as that, and I forgot to mention they're a very young team, a very, very young team.
That's true.
So to pick up these wins is going to mean so much to them, and to do it twice at home as well. Just we've seen the scenes whenever they win, like it's not too often. It's
love the way
wonderful.
The crowd comes out for them despite the record, despite the expectations. They're there, they're going crazy every score. It's really cool.
And they should have beaten the Lions as well. We forget that. Like that was a 1-score game that went right down to the wire. They should have turned over the Lions. There is a good chance they beat Benetton in one of those 2 games. And then if you're looking at it with 3 wins to their first 9, you're thinking that's a good season for Zebra. Again, you hold everyone to their own standards. That's a good first half if they can do that.
Well, our last non-Irish URC fixture, it was the Sharks versus the Stormers. Pretty fun game it turned out to be. It looked like one-way traffic most of the way, but then crazy ending with the Stormers getting a penalty try, and then it looked like they had scored a go-ahead try after the clock had gone red, but it got brought back because of a knock-on. Really close, but really fun game. I feel like the Sharks might have figured out that they're the team we all thought they were going to be last year. Like they've been underperforming, and I think something clicked. I think they're back.
Yeah, I think it eventually got to them that they if they put it together, they can do something, because it has been a pretty tidy start. Now, for every game like this one where they get an important victory, or the important victory over Munster with a bonus point, there's games like the Connacht game where they're cruising. They look like this is it. They're going to win in Ireland, and then they just get blown out of the water. So there's still a massive inconsistency around the Sharks. But to be 4-2 after 6 games, with the majority of that without your internationals, is very, very good for them, because it's typically when Eben Etzebeth, Eben Etzebeth's one of the greatest rugby players who I will ever get to watch, right? But he's also one of the biggest level raisers in South African rugby. Like, I think it's him and Sia that drive everyone else up. Sia obviously has a lot more injury problems, which can happen. He's a little bit older, but Eben Etzebeth, he is the standard bearer on this team. So when he gets back in and he plays a lot more games come January, February, March, I think the Sharks are on a top 4 push here. Look, I still have concerns based on last year that they look like a team who should win every game, but only win half of them. That still remains. But we're starting to see a little bit more consistency. They're better up, they're higher up the table than they were. And they're going to be in Champions Cup this year, but that's going to be a lot of fun. Like, we're going to see some fun matchups there. But definitely one to keep an eye on. I think they've replaced the Stormers as that kind of like the team alongside the Bulls. I'll put it that way in terms of South African teams.
Yeah, I think the window might have closed for Stormers. They don't look like the team that won it a few years ago.
No, they really don't. And like, I think they will rebuild, and I think they'll get back to it. Like, they have got, in my opinion, the best talent at 10 in the world game of anyone under the age of, even say 25. I think Sasha he is that guy. But I don't think it's going to be their year. Like, they're quite a ways down the table. Like a lot of teams, most teams fall into the 2, 3, or 4 wins this season bracket. Like, literally all bar 4 teams. So, but like 2 and 4 at this point, they've got a lot of work to do. They really do. And like, to put on my Munster hat for a second, it's really disappointing that Munster didn't beat them down there, because the legs just went from Munster in the last half an hour of that game. Yeah. But so there's life with the Stormers, and with Sasha back, there's always life with the Stormers. But I just don't see it being this year, unfortunately, because these blocks are important. You go block 1, block 2, block 3. Typically, there's only maybe 1 or 2 teams that'll make a move. You have to get out of the gates fast. And I'm not sure if the Stormers are going to be one of them.
Well, that brings us to the more relevant fixtures for our chat today. We, of course, had the Irish teams playing. We started with a nice little derby, Ulster versus Leinster. A lot of people seem to have the feeling that I erroneously had last year, that Ulster are on the ascent and maybe capable of big things. I'm just not falling for it anymore. I feel like they've burned me too many times. But I'll ask you, are Ulster for real this year?
Yes, they are, David. Yes, they are. I think they are very much for real. I do look at that team and I think, God, they've been burned by a few too many injuries. You look at just the pack. They had Marty Moore has retired, as we know. Rob Herring was on Ireland duty. Tom Stewart, this is his first game of the season. And Tom O'Toole played for Ireland. Ian Henderson was involved with Ireland as well, as was Cormac Izuchukwu. And they're also without, I think Sean Raffel might be injured. He might be just left out of the team. But that is the core of your starting pack gone. And you're starting to see that wide a bit. Jacob started to pick up an injury in Ireland duty. That's really unfortunate.
Yeah, I was so happy to see him back in the green too. I have a soft spot for him, and it's been a long road to get back in that squad.
Yeah, we all love an underdog, and I feel like saying underdog is really disrespectful. He's not, but we all do love an underdog and a comeback story. But I think injuries could be what changes Ulster. The only thing is, because as I said, the Champions Cup is a life of its own, and teams have started to treat it differently to the URC again, which before it used to come first. If I'm Ulster, I'm looking at that Bordeaux and Toulouse game and thinking, do you know what? I don't know what we need to do there. We'll pit up, we'll show up at home. The away game, I'm not too sure. I can't remember which one they have away. I think it's Toulouse away and Bordeaux at home. And I think, you look at that Bordeaux game and go, right, we'll give them a rattle. Toulouse, let them off. And we'll just focus on ourselves. And then you got 2 English teams in Leicester and Exeter. And, you shouldn't fear them. Maybe not great matchups for Ulster, bear in mind. But you shouldn't fear them, especially not Exeter with the way they've been going. No. I think if Ulster could just get themselves right between now and the end of January, both form and fitness, I think they'll be fine. They have work-ons. Set piece seems to be struggling a small bit again. Like the moving of Tom O'Toole from loose head to tight head to loose head to tight head is ridiculous. But no, I'd be fairly confident that Ulster will break into the top 8 again this year. I'm not as high in them as I was, because you look at that injury list now and sometimes it's not your year. And it can sound so cliched, but sometimes it's just not. So hopefully the ship will be steady, because I have great confidence in Richie Murphy. He's a great coach. They've got great talent there. I mentioned Cormac Izuchukwu earlier and Harry Sheridan earlier, but they've also got Aidan Morgan, who's a really flashy player. They've got, Stuart McCluskey is just, he's Stuart McCluskey. I don't need to say anything else. He's Stuart McCluskey. And obviously if Jacob gets back, and I think that Ulster team on paper is a lot stronger than people often give credit for, especially here in Ireland.
Is Mike Lowry the Darcy Graham of Ulster?
It's not a bad comparison, both size and multiple different reasons. But yeah, potentially. I'm not gone on the Mike Lowry at wing experiment, but certainly with the way the game is going, it's probably the right decision. But if I was to focus on any one Ulster back, I'd probably look at Stuart Moore at the moment, because I think he's really coming alive in the 15 shirt for them. But as well as that, Werner Koch, the long-haired guy, the guy who you cannot miss because of those incredible Tarzan-like locks, he's had a great
the
start.
Robert Plant of rugby.
He kind of is, and he's had a great start to life at Ulster, and he's the type of player that fans will get behind. I can see him having a big moment in an Interpro that gets Ravenhill onto its feet because he's just that kind of player.
Yeah. Well, they signed Vermeulen, right, a few years ago, and that just kind of never went anywhere. Maybe maybe they're hungry for a flashier, more sort of standout guy like Werner.
Yeah, I think look, Dwayne Vermeulen would have done so much good stuff for Ulster because of the fact that he's Dwayne Vermeulen. So it should go without saying. But even like Stephen Kitsoff, they address issues, but sometimes you want your non-Irish qualified players, of which there is a cap on in Ireland, to be flashy and to be something different. Do you know what I mean? So there was always that sense of kind of what could have been. Like Marcel Coetzee was a great signing because he was big carrier, big tackler, big work rate. So no, I'm still holding out hope for Ulster. Don't get me wrong, I'm still holding out hope for Ulster. They're my second province, I feel like, at the moment, or have been for a while since I kind of started covering Ulster. So I'll hold out hope for them just for now.
Well, Ben Carson, it was his third start, and he got his first try for Ulster. What are your predictions for him? It looks like he could be somebody special.
I have not seen a lot of Ben Carson. I won't lie, and I actually didn't see this game live either, so I just hold my hand up there. But again, like I looked at the James Hume injury, and he's sidelined for quite a while, and thought that's a hammer blow. But Carson and Jude Postlewaite looked like veterans at times this season. Both of them have, and even Jude's only played like 3 games for Ulster this year, but he was very good on the Emerging Ireland tour, like very, very good on the Emerging Ireland tour. So Ulster's definitely, their depth is quite bright there. I think long term it will be Jude who will push there. He looks like the guy who's pro ready. When I seen him at 20s, I was a big fan of his for the Ireland 20s. But Ben Carson, like, talk about taking your opportunity. Some guys, they'll only ever get like 15 games for their province, and they could have the best 15 games, but they just might all they'll ever get. Some guys, they come in under the radar and they become stars, and maybe that's what Ben Carson's going to be. And if he is, like, it could have been that, those tries against Leinster that kickstarted something really, really special. Unfortunately not, but it really could have been.
Well, my favorite moment of this game was the comms. At some point, they said, "Well, it was miserable earlier. It's only unpleasant now," which I thought was a really nice way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing about it was probably Mark Robson, because Mark Robson always has the one-liners. He is just fantastic at stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying that's who it was, but if it was, that would explain so much.
It's a frustration watching here because there's no pregame stuff, there's no lead up, there's no chat from the comms, and they never introduce them. So unless I recognize a specific voice, I have no idea who the comms are. I've started to pick out different people, but I couldn't pick him out of the lineup, unfortunately.
Yeah, I had a bit of that yesterday, so I caught the end of the Connacht game as I got to Thomond Park in very unpleasant conditions and miserable conditions at times, and I had no idea who the co-coms was at all because it was actually
like you
Ronan
weren't going
Loughney.
to have any trouble parking, though. Didn't look like that was going to be an issue.
Well, I actually walked out from the city, so definitely no trouble parking. I regretted that by the time I got there. It was raining quite heavily, but had a similar case because it was Ronan Loughney was on, and Ronan Loughney does the coverage for TG Cahir here in Ireland, which is an Irish language channel. So when I heard him, I was like, that voice is familiar, but I have no idea who that is. And I was like, oh my god, yes, like that's just him speaking English. I just never get to hear it. He was really, really good. But we do get that here. That's the one thing about having 2 languages is people sound very different when they speak the 2 languages here in Ireland. Like if I started speaking Cúpla Focal and read something out, you would not think it's the same person. But again, I'm just selling Ireland to a global audience.
I love it. Well, I would be curious. Next time we chat, maybe we can talk about that Emerging Ireland tour you already mentioned. It's gone through a couple iterations now. I was really lucky. I got Bernard Jackman on the show a while back, and he was so dead set against that. That first iteration of the Emerging Ireland tour. He had nothing but bad things to say about it. I'd be curious how he feels about it now, and maybe we'll save it for another time to get your take on how that's been going.
Yeah, I mean, if in a line, I think the second tour was a lot better insofar as it was much younger players who were not going to play a huge amount of minutes. There was exceptions, don't get me wrong, but the vast majority of them were younger. We're not going to get a lot of URC minutes, whereas the first time it was URC starters going down to play. And no disrespect to the Cheetahs and the Pumas and teams like that, but teams who were not even Challenge Cup standard at the time.
Right.
You know, the EPCR Challenge Cup I'm on about. So this time was much, much better in my opinion.
Well, you just mentioned Connacht. They were playing the Bulls. By the way, have you started calling it the Dexcom yet? Because I never will.
No, I won't. It's always been the sports ground. I'm a Galway man. I'm from Galway. Long story, we won't get into that. But it's always been the sports ground. It's always been the coldest spot in Ireland and the wettest spot in Ireland. But no, Dexcom sounds too much like a pale ale pint that you might get at some edgy bar.
I was going to go with acne medicine.
That too, yeah. It can be a lot of things. I think they are in the medical devices industry, so that would actually make a lot of sense. But no, it'll never be the Dexcom. It'll be the sports ground.
Well, a red card, and this one looked pretty bad for Connacht, and then it started pouring as the first half wore on. Close to halftime, the tackle count was 68-17. That seems like a fake stat, right?
It really does. I actually didn't see that one pop up. I did see the red card, and it was, I have no complaints. That was a red card. I am, for anyone who listens to my shows, I'm very much, if in doubt, give a red. Like I'm the anti red card ruins games guy. But no, it was one-way traffic in a lot of ways in this game. Obviously, the Bulls raced into was it 28-0 or 28-7 lead by the time they got that bonus point. But that's just what the Bulls can do to you at times, isn't it? Like they can score from nothing. Like two of their tries literally came from kind of nothing. So that's what they can do. Good to see Connacht fighting back and getting back into the game, but
yeah,
that's Connacht just have a knack of losing 1 or 2 home games a year to a visiting team like, say, the Bulls or the Lions last year, where you're just wondering, it's like, I actually thought you'd win this. It doesn't matter what's on paper. It's just that, you get used to Connacht winning these games. So credit to them. It's become a surprise when they get beating convincingly. But they're still 8th. They're still in a good position.
Well, and they seem the most thin when their internationals are away out of all the Irish teams. Is that the sort of the fundamental issue with Connacht? Is it depth?
Yeah, I don't know. Look, depth is absolutely a factor, especially in the leagues and things like that. But no, I wouldn't say it's all that. Like I do think like the Jack Ainger and Sam Elo is the two props, and both of them did quite well in this game. The wings, I went to school with Shane Jennings, who started back for Connacht, so of course he played very well. No, it's like Shane is a very talented rugby player, and he will get a lot of Connacht caps if injuries stay his way. I still think the back three was fine, because even though they'd no Mac Hansen. Yes, they had no Mac Hansen, and that's a factor that'll affect any team. I don't agree with the IFU having a game on a non-earmarked weekend, even though it's going to happen. That's fine. Like it's going to happen for financial reasons, but I don't think it's the big factor. I think if anything, it's more so the fact that the Bulls were able to bring back in Moody and LaRue and guys like that, guys who were just like on a bad day, they probably still walk into the Connacht team. And I don't mean that in any way is disrespectful, but Willie LaRue on a bad day is still one of the top 10 fullbacks we've ever seen in the game.
Sure.
So.
By the way, which Van der Merwe would you rather be, Acker or Duhan?
Oh, it's funny because if there's one thing those two brothers share, apart from parents, obviously, and gene pool, it's the fact that they're both really good at scoring tries, but not very good at doing one thing in the game. For Duhan, it's defending, and for Acker, it's line-out work, which are kind of fundamentals. I'd probably still go with Duhan because he always seems to score a hat-trick against England, and that's the most fun thing you can do in any sport.
That is
it doesn't matter if it's rugby.
The ultimate bucket list.
Yeah, so I'll go with him. And look, he just has it. Like he's a winger, but he just he's got the kind of action figure look to him. So I'll go with Duhan. But no, Acker's still a fine player. Like I do joke in jest, like they still have a good lineup, but it's just throwing is not his strong point, unfortunately.
Well, I heard at one point his nickname is the Angry Warthog, and I'm just like, well, the day you get that nickname, you either really embrace it or you're like, hey.
Yeah, there's no like in between with that one, is there? It's like very on the nose type of one.
I figure I'd be like, I'm not that angry, But Munster, of course, they were playing the Lions. Got to say, I was surprised to see what looked like a pretty sparse crowd. I talked to Patricia Vieira recently, and she mentioned, well, there was an Ireland game happening at the same time, and she was very pleased with how quickly she was able to get out of the lot. But I thought it was an automatic sellout there every week. I was very surprised by that.
I know. Cork sells out every week. I'll give Cork their dues because it's 8,000. The weather was a factor. Like there's 3 factors for me, right? Ireland are playing on 4 hours beforehand. So that's going to factor into how many people get to the game. That's perfectly normal. You've got just the weather was atrocious all day. So that'll always take a few. And we had the general election, which I mentioned to you before we came on air. And that will people will be preoccupied. There will be people who would have been working for it and different things. It's a big operation here. So when you factor all that in, it's still less than I would have expected. But anyone who was there was treated to a surprisingly good game. Now, it was probably a great example that ball and play time does not equal the best quality of rugby, because there was very high ball and play in the first half, but there was no end product or accuracy. But there was some great scores in this game, some real physicality, some great goal line defense. Both set pieces held up really well to the nerds like me up in the stand. But yeah, definitely a Hugh, to give him his credit, said 17-10 is a proper rugby scoreline. And I think that's the best way to put it.
That's fair. And by the way, I was not too familiar with this kit that Munster were wearing, the pale green and white hoops. Is there some historic factor with that? I liked it.
No, it's just Adidas trying to sell jerseys. It's not too dissimilar to what we have in the very corner of the screens. It's that kind of a blue when you see it. It does kind of look green on telly, I'll give you that. But when you see it in person, it's very much blue.
Really?
Yeah, I don't want to get into what colour is the dress of 2014, but that's what this could be. If Munster go on a run and they have to wear this jersey a few times, we could be having that conversation. I think it was strange. I was very surprised.
They said they couldn't read the numbers on the back. The numbers just blended right in.
Yeah, that was a big issue. I was very close to tweeting something similar. I was up in the stands and I was like, I can't read. Like DM Bluler, for example, it was his first game. I had to double check to see who that was at times because I couldn't read the number. Now credit to DM Bluler, he had an unbelievable game. But yeah, no, a back number would have been better on a very, very pale jersey.
Well, Munster, of course, were behind heading into the lockers, as you already mentioned. The crowd were dead silent, at least from the replay I'm watching. Both teams just looked a little off, at least in the first half. That just happens, though, sometimes, right? And was the weather that big a factor?
The weather was a factor. I meant the ball very, very greasy because it rained and then it stopped. Like it rained very heavily and then it stopped. So you will get that kind of greasiness to it as opposed to playing in the rain. No, it had the feel of first day back kind of vibes, from both teams. Because like Munster played against the All Blacks and the All Blacks XV at the start of the month. But still, aside from that, it's very much, a few weeks off. Same for the Lions. And it had that kind of vibe, conditions then. But I did enjoy this one. Maybe I'm a bit of a, sicko, as they say. But I did enjoy this game. I thought it was a bit of fun. Very tense, obviously, because it went right down to the wire. It looked like Munster had botched their game management at the end, but
I thought for anyone who kind of saved the day a little bit.
He did, and for anyone who didn't see it, the clock on the TV and the clock in the stadium were different. I do not know which one was right. Usually you say the TV one. So I think that's where there might have been confusion. I think people at home might have seen time is up, just kick it out, whereas the clock in at the stadium was about 30 seconds behind that.
Oh, wow.
So that may have added to it. Now, still, hit your passes. Don't knock on or don't fumble the ball, in the last couple of seconds of the game. That still holds true. That they're still the fundamentals of the game. But that could have added to viewer confusion because a few people have said it to me. But yeah, definitely a scrappy, kind of nip and tuck, kind of physical game. I was impressed with the Lions to a certain degree insofar as they are so physical. They are so electric. Edwin van der Merwe, obviously. Henko van Veek. I think he is the prodigy for the modern centre. He's so strong, but he is unbelievably elusive. It's one of the best tries I've ever seen scored in Thomond Park, to be honest.
Yeah.
Even if a few lads would have been disappointed with their efforts. But then Takir Abrahams decides to go, you know what? My time to shine. And he, explodes down the right-hand wing, gives that off to Shane Daly. Shane scores, Munster go in front, and they don't look back from there. It was never comfortable, but it did feel like they were just going to see it out in the end, and they did. And that's a massive win because it's a 4-game losing slide if you include the All Blacks game.
It was
so
a huge
it's a
win,
big one.
And is this one of those, we love this result because it was tough? Is this a character-building win?
Yeah, it really is. I think with Munster, you get a lot more of those than other teams, especially more than Leinster. So, we love these ones. Just, backs to the wall. We have to produce the results, and we did. And it's still a good win because the Lions are still a good team. I'd have slight reservations about the Lions insofar as they look to tire in games or they look to just drop off in quality.
Yep.
It wasn't really as applicable here, but they did look too tired towards the end of the game. Because that was certainly a factor for Munster all season and was last night. But a win is a win, and Munster go in. They play Stade Francais in Europe next week, and they'll have all the marquee internationals back: Byrne, Murray, O'Mahony, Casey, Crowley, of course, Nash.
What do you want Munster's approach to be to Europe? Do you want them to say, forget about it, let's concentrate on getting healthy and just let that take care of itself and try to get back in the URC? Opposite? Do you think they should try it for both?
I don't think you can with Munster. Like, they're a 2-time champion. They're an aristocrat. I think there's 2 teams for me, and yes, I'm biased here. There's 2 teams for me that signify European rugby, and it's Munster and Toulouse, because they were there in 95 and they're there now. So I don't think you ever can. But for Munster, they have to be better than they were last year. Like, last year, they did not win a home game in Europe for the first time ever. Even, so wow. There was dark days. So there's that factor. And then just the fact that, like, their last 3 exits in Europe was lost to Northampton last year gallantly, but with the team fighting a stomach virus. The year before, they lost to the Sharks in 35-degree heat. The only reason they went to the Sharks was because Edinburgh shocked Saracens in the last game of the Boone Stages, if you remember. And the year before that was penalties. So maybe the luck is going to turn, but it's Munster. We never seem to have good fortune. I feel like we've traded like a decade of good luck for that URC title. That's my only fear. I think that could be what's actually on the horizon.
Well, okay. I know this is not news, but the Munster firing, I think we can call it that, of Graham Roundtree, it still has me scratching my head. His team had the same record they did when they won the whole damn competition a couple of years ago. It's just, so many things seemed weird about the timing. Are we ever going to know what really happened? What's the mood of Munster fans right now about that whole thing?
I think because of when it happened, it seems to have kind of died down now. There will always be people who will ask questions of what happened. We're never going to know. When you see by mutual consent, that means, essentially something has been signed. You're not going to find out. Maybe you'll find out bits through the kind of the rumor mill. Not everything you hear in rumors is true. I should advise people as well. But no, look, I think it's washed under the carpet. Graham Roundtree was excellent to Munster, and he deserves to go down as a club legend for what he did for the club. But ultimately, the RFU are not in the business of sacking coaches. It's only essentially the 3rd sacking in about 10 years at a province.
Interesting.
So I think you have to respect the fact as well that this was probably the decision that all parties meant had to happen. I think Mike Prendergast will end up being the next head coach, but with a high-profile senior coach coming in there, whoever that might be. I think they'll try and get someone in there for kind of to help him through his first head coaching role. I feel like that's the kind of role you'd be looking for with a senior coach. Probably worth noting as well that head coaches and a senior coach are usually paid for by the RFU. So they will help in the process of hiring future coaches. So it'll be very interesting to see how they go after it. The media will link Stuart Lancaster. I'm not sure if that's going to happen now, but it will be very, very fun because Stuart Lancaster is an unbelievable coach. If it's not him and it's someone else, like incredibly tongue-in-cheek here, Johan van Graan seems like a good guy to build up a squad if I don't want to bring him back. Now, the only thing is Johan is a very good coach at building a squad. He just doesn't have the infinite money glitch that they seem to have at Bath at the moment, where they could just sign a load of world-class players. But no, we'll wait and see how it goes. It'll never truly come out, but I
I
think
feel like it feels like there has to be a conspiracy, but I actually think there's a possibility it was just like a maybe he was sick of everyone panicking every time he loses a game. He might have been like, you know what,
if that's the
enough.
case, it's the worst job in the world because Munster get analysed to death. Now, yes, I analyse Munster, don't get me wrong, but like Munster could lose to the 2015 All Blacks, and you'd probably have a piece in the newspaper saying, "Are they finished? Should we just wind up the province as we know it?" So definitely the wrong club for that.
Well, as far as this season, I feel like that was a bad omen for Munster and how they're going to finish up. But where do you see the regions ranked by the end of this year? It's got to be Leinster on top, but then who do you see after them? Do you think Ulster might take that second spot?
If I was to bet now, I'd say probably Ulster is the second highest province.
Interesting.
Munster probably have the most upside insofar as they've got a lot of players to come back in. Like you look at how Jeremy Luckman is injured, Dave Kilcoyne, Roman Salnoa, Ollie Yeager, Sean Klein, Tom Ahern. Granted, he's just an probably back this week. Edwin Adogbo, obviously all the internationals. So Munster probably have more upside in terms of who's to come back in and all that. But I think Ulster will finish as the second highest province. Connacht, I feel like, will finish as the lowest of the provinces again. They've had a good start to the season, but they have essentially beaten 3 teams they were expected to beat and lost to 4 teams they were expected to lose to.
Yep.
So mid-table seems about where they're at. I think Munster are too good for mid-table. I think the only thing that puts Munster in there is either the fact that it's going to be such a vacuum that's impossible to get out of, or they've just given themselves too much to do.
Well, I support Connacht, and it's my guess that my team's the only Irish team that's going to miss the playoffs again this year.
I mean, possibly. I wouldn't be shocked if 2 Irish teams miss the playoffs this year because of how tight it's going to be. I don't want to see that happen because that has serious financial repercussions with Europe, and Irish fans really just turn up for the Investec Champions Cup, I should say, not the Heineken Cup. But no, I could definitely see it because I just...
Cup. Come on.
It is the Heineken Cup. Of course it is. See, Dave, you're a man of taste, but it's just too high, too tight to tall. Like, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams. Almost half of the league has either 3 or 4 wins after 7 games. So, like, how do you separate
it really
that?
Exciting too.
It really is. It really is. And like, yes, there's a little bit of a drop off there towards the bottom, like 3 or 4 teams. But like, you love to see it. Is the best way of putting it. You just love to see this.
So if we look at the larger picture, I've heard a lot of people saying, the Irish national team, they've been quietly aging, while Farrell hasn't been particularly interested to blood new talent. Do you think that criticism is fair? I mean, this is a team that's at or right about number 1 in the world and has been for a good while. Is it silly to be all gloom and doom?
Yeah, I mean, criticism is going to come the way of any national coach. I think the reason Farrell got so defensive, and I mean this nicely, is because he hasn't had much criticism in recent years. Like, Ireland got knocked out of the World Cup, and it was kind of, yeah, well, small margins, we lost. It's like, yeah, but, like, tell me why. You know what I mean? That's what I ask from pundits, and that's what I think people who listen to my show should expect from me, is that I try and give a reason why, why I think, and so on and so forth. So I think that's why Farrell has been very defensive. That and the fact that he's going to be the Lions coach soon. And if this autumn went badly, you'd have basically a 6-month run-in of, is Farrell the right man for the Lions job? So there's that. But I go back to what I said earlier. I think the depth is there in Ireland. I think it just needs to be tested. I think a couple of more guys need to get caps. Front row in particular, because it's, I think the drop-off behind Porter is so unknown. Hooker maybe less so. I think second row, because all of those guys are, 30 or above. I think James Ryan's 29. 20. He could be 28 actually. Now that I do the maths on when he played under 20s, but still, he's still pushing on a small bit. So there's definitely a few positions that need to be tested soon. But going into the Six Nations, like I don't want to see Ireland go for another 35-man squad that you could nearly, roll out of bed and predict. I want to test it. I want to see a bigger squad. I want to see them give chances, because like, yes, it's England first and then it's Scotland away and then it's France. You finish with Wales, and I think they finish at Wales. and Italy. Like, you're going to know what the story is at that stage. And if the Six Nations is gone at that stage, like, the tickets been sold, they're away games. Prize money is important, but I'd be starting to test the squad for those games almost regardless, because I actually think they can still win. So
Yeah.
definitely one to look out for.
Well, it's amazing. It's as if you have a sneak preview of my script because you keep tossing these over the plate, just lining them up perfectly. With Andy Farrell off to coach the Lions, what will that mean for the national team? Like, will the interim coach have the power to make those big decisions? And here's my little theoretical for you. What if he makes big moves to get younger talent in there, really mixes things up, and then they run the table, maybe get a grand slam? Will that have a detrimental effect on how people feel about Andy Farrell?
I think that's the really funny part about it, because Simon Easterby is an accomplished coach. He's coached in many places, so he can clearly do it. But, and here's the big but in this one, he can't go on his own philosophy if his philosophy is different to Andy Farrell, because Andy's still going to come back in there. So he has to, there has to be some
take the
level of
reins
overlap.
and keep the ship. I'm mixing metaphors here.
I think so. And like Wales in 2013, 2017, they kind of, they still followed the same idea, even if they did bring in kind of new players. They won a Six Nations in one of those years, of course. But yeah, it's fascinating. And I keep coming back to that word, and I keep coming back to saying it, like, Ireland are finally interesting again, because it's not just about will they win, or, it's every single layer. There's actually a question mark about Ireland, good or bad. So they're finally a fascinating team again. How hands-off Farrell will be when he's in Lions mode will be really interesting as well, because he's a very hands-on coach. Like, he's the guy who's there shouting during the training or during the warm-up reps and things like that. So
that's what I was kind of wondering. Is he going to be able to help himself? Is he going to be constantly on the phone like, hey, by the way, don't forget? Like, is he going to try to do both jobs at the same time?
That's the thing. He's got like he's going to have to go to like England, Scotland, for example. I just plucked that one out of thin air, and that's going to be the same day as Ireland play Wales, or the same weekend as Ireland play Wales. Is he going to be able to, again, is he going to be able to help himself? Is he going to be on the phone? Like, is Johnny Sexton, like, if you're going to go conspiratorial, is Johnny Sexton coming in there to be Andy Farrell's right-hand man? Is that the reason he's in there? It's not. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not the reason he's in there. But, like,
but it's fun to speculate.
It's very fun to speculate, as you know yourself. So it's interesting, and I would love to see Ireland test their squad. The reality is it's going to be next year's summer tour when they go around Europe that we see it, but maybe one can hope that, I'm not going to hope for injuries, but maybe one can hope that they have to make a couple of changes come springtime.
Caolan, this has been so much fun. I need to let you go. You've already given me more than an hour. It's been absolutely fantastic. I feel like we need to get together and do this as frequently as possible, because I can't get enough of this. I don't have a pub I can go to and watch rugby and talk to people about it. It doesn't exist. So this is all I've got.
No, this has been absolutely brilliant, David. And likewise, it's all, as I said, it's so much fun to come on to new podcasts, but to talk about Munster and Ireland, and to use the word conspiracy in there, and a little bit about hurling, this is a first for me. It's not the first on StreamYard, not things like that, or with my face front and center, but this was a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it, and to all your audience, thank you for tuning in as well.
Well, before I let you go, I do want to get your little predictions for the Six Nations. Are you calling a Grand Slam for Ireland right now?
I'm not calling a Grand Slam for anyone. I think France are too difficult on the road, as in their away games. I think Ireland will slip up somewhere between France, England, or Scotland. I think England are going to be close. My head at the moment says France are going to win a championship, no Grand Slam, which in some ways would be unbelievable, because then we've got another year of Antoine Dupont discourse, because he'd have won something else. But at the moment, I'm just leaning towards France.
We'll have to do wellness checks on poor Squidge if that happens.
Oh, look, I give so much credit to Squidge for what he does for the game. But like, his love of Antoine Dupont, he's the only person I know apart from me who loves Antoine Dupont as much as he does.
Put me on the list. Okay, what do you see in the URC? Are we going to have another new champion this year?
I think so.
And by the way, as a side note, would that be best for the URC and growth if 4 seasons, 4 different champions, or do you think a dynasty is good for a competition?
I think my fundamental belief in sport is that you need one team to like come from nowhere and have a really good season, and one big team to have a really bad season. So I apply that to the Premier League, to hurling, rugby, whatever it might be. Six Nations the same, and that's what I'm kind of getting at here. I think if Leinster go on and win it, it'll be really good for the league. We've seen Glasgow, we've seen Munster, we've seen the Stormers. They were great wins for the league. If Leinster go on and win it and prove, okay, like you can't take us for granted anymore. We're actually going to win this thing. That wouldn't be a bad thing. And they kind of need it as well, to be fair. They can't keep losing semi-finals.
I don't know if need is the word I would use, but...
So I'll go with Leinster. Like, they've signed Sneeman and Barrett for this. Like, if they don't win it now, like, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, maybe we should maybe Leinster, the hole in the Irish pocket that we need to get rid of. Like, if they don't win the URC at this stage. But I think they will. Although I said that last year. I think Leinster will do the double. I said that in May.
I do wonder if there were any Bulls fans listening, they might be like, hello, right here.
The Bulls and Jack Crowley have saved the league from Leinster dominance.
And every final has been in South Africa. There's got to be a team that's going to be right there again.
Yeah, absolutely. At the moment, I'd say the Bulls again. I think the Bulls have a lot of things to work on. I think that's the weird thing about this year. I think last year you probably could have said this team looks very complete and this team looks very complete. This year, I think no one does. Not even Leinster, who were 7 from 7. But no, I think. Do you know what? A Bulls Leinster final would be spicy. Obviously, a Munster Leinster final would be very spicy. Yeah. Because imagine how much you could get out of that as a media person like myself. But like you could have myself and Patricia coming to you from Dublin, celebrating live on the show, for instance. But
amazing.
No, look, I think
I do wonder would that be bad for the rest of fandom though? Like, if it was an all South African final or an all Irish final, would all the Italian fans and all the Scottish fans be like, I've got something to do that day?
Yeah, potentially. But then, I mean, I didn't watch the Glasgow Bulls final. Part heartbreak, part I was working. You can believe whichever one you want there. I think the thing about the URC is people are just tuning in anyway at this stage. So I think it's not massively affected. Obviously, an Irish South African final would be huge because you got the two biggest markets in terms of TV viewership.
Yep.
Realistically, it's not going to be a Welsh or an Italian team this year. If it's Glasgow, fair play to Glasgow. If they get back and they try and run it back. At the moment, my big three is Leinster, Glasgow, Bulls. If I was to predict, I'd say a Leinster, Glasgow final. But again, an all-Irish final in Dublin would be pretty cool too,
I'm under the impression it's a pain in the butt to get 2 games in Dublin.
It's easy to get 2 games. It can be difficult coming home because of infrastructure in Ireland. But no, look, it's not the worst. We do complain. It's not ideal for like 8:00 games on a Friday, like what Ireland had against New Zealand and Argentina. But if it's a daytime game, Dublin is very easy to get in and out of because all roads lead to, like, literally all roads in Ireland lead to Dublin. But it's just for those evening games that can get a little bit tricky, which is a pity because, look, the RFU need to make money somehow, and that's why the tickets are so Dublin-centric because they're the ones who can go. But it is a pity that it is affecting atmosphere and all that. And again, we'll probably have that chat another day or with other people, but it's kind of the realities of sport now at this stage, isn't it? You just have to sell to the highest bidder because rugby is pulling itself up by the bootstraps.
Final thing, what about Europe? Is it finally the year of the 5th star?
So 2 years ago, I said Leinster would beat La Rochelle. Sorry, the 2 finals in a row, I said Leinster beat La Rochelle. I thought they'd just have enough. Now, they were small margin games. Thing. Last year, I said Leinster at the start of the season, and then I said Toulouse the week of the final. This year, I'm going to abstain from making a bold call, but it's Leinster, Toulouse have to be the top 2, undoubtedly. They're the 2 that you can't have past. La Rochelle are not the same team. Northampton are not the same team. You could see a bolter from the URC, like, say, a Glasgow. I
didn't even believe in Northampton while they were winning the Premiership. I just are we sure this is happening?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I've been to see Northampton the last couple of seasons just because they've been playing Munster, and I think they look really well coached. I would love to see Bath go on a run because, again, they're one of the typical traditional clubs. Maybe not in Europe, but just in general. I'd love to see them go on a run. So I'll say Freudian slip. I'll say Leinster Toulouse is the top two, that if someone beats them, they're going to a final. And then I'd put Bath, Glasgow, Bordeaux as the one from each league as the kind of next man up.
Well, Sharks are in the Champions Cup this year instead of the Challenge, I think.
They are.
Last year.
It's just travel.
I feel like they're either going to send the kids and be like, or everyone better watch out.
Yeah, and look, if you have to play the Sharks in any game in South Africa, I do not fancy it myself, especially at Durban. But no, I think I'd go. Yeah, no, I can't put them in that mix. I'll stick with those five as kind of being thereabouts. I think we'll get at least 3 of those in the semi-finals. That's my bold claim. At least 3 of those be in the semi-finals of Bath, Bordeaux, Glasgow, Leinster, Toulouse.
My secret little desire is down in the Challenge Cup. I want to see the Cheetahs go on another run. Like this homeless team, they're in different towns every week, and yet they're winning. Last year was really fun. I want to see more of the same from them. As somebody who always roots for the underdog, I love that.
Yeah, and even like the final is in Cardiff. Like I know I said Bath kind of just as plucking a team from England. A Bath being in the final in Cardiff would be really, really cool as well as like the Irish teams, because we've got that significance of Cardiff. So that would be there. I would love, because you mentioned the Cheetahs, I would love to see a European final in Amsterdam at some stage. Oh. It's made for it. I was out there before on holidays. I went out to the stadium, and it's made for it. I can picture it in my head, really? But it's another few years away. We have to get to Rome first, which seems like a few years away as is. So it could be the 2030s.
How many people does it seat? Do you know?
I can get it here in 2 seconds. I think it's like 60 something.
Oh wow! Okay. That's great.
So it's pretty big. The Johan Cruyff Arena, 56,000. So it's a little bit bigger than the Aviva Stadium. And considering where it would be, I think it would still sell out.
Yeah, it would be packed. Oh wow. Caolan, you are a gentleman and a scholar. I really appreciate your time. This has been amazing. Please tell us what's coming up next for you. What should people be looking out for? Where can they subscribe to you and get all your content?
I'll give a mini exclusive teaser. I'm planning a big podcast interview for before the Six Nations time. So if anyone wants to jump on, then just be ready for that one.
On Caolan S Rugby?
On my own. Yeah, maybe even on the Red Army as well, it should be said. Okay. That's to be looked into. But for now, it's just URC, Europe, and just go through. I think it's going through the motions until the Six Nations hits, and it's full steam ahead, because that's not just the men's Six Nations. We've got the women's Six Nations. It's a World Cup year. We're going to be covering that as well. So it's going to be a very busy 2025. But for now, for the next 4 weeks, we're putting it, going down the gears, taking it easy a little bit. You're going to freewheel because there's a lot of rugby, as you know yourself. There's a lot of rugby these days.
The autumn internationals are nice for me because it's a huge break. Because there are times during the year when everything is overlapping. Because I watch Super Rugby, I watch the NPC, of course. I'm a founding member of the Free Jacks, so I'm at every MLR game, and there are times when it's so crazy you feel like I can't watch any of these and actually enjoy them. So when the number is a handful of tests, it's like, okay, thanks. This is a real gift.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just anything that's not gung-ho, like 17 rugby matches a weekend on TV, almost feels like light relief at this stage, which is... and it's the fact that the quality is so good that we want to watch it. That's the uplifting way to frame it.
That's the thing. Like I've kind of had my head in the sand with the top 14 this year because I just haven't had the bandwidth to follow it. But Lord knows if the Pro de Deux was available, I'd be watching that.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Pro de Deux factor as well, no doubt about it.
Okay, I'm going to let you go, sir. Thank you again so much for being here. Cheers. Talk to you soon. And be well.
Thank you.
It gives me great pleasure to be here today.
Oh, it does, Neat.
You want to tempt the wrath of the whatever from high atop the thing?